Good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to this webinar hosted by Europe Direct Clonus and Europe Direct Ballinasloe. My name is Maeve McCormack and I'm coming to you this evening from Sligo. So we've a nice spread around the northwest. We've got 4 panellists this evening, as I'm sure you know and you're all dying to meet. We'll meet them shortly. They are Maria Walsh, MEP for Midlands Northwest, Uremeu Adejinmi, who is the Mayor of Longford, Dr. Michelle Marr, Project Manager with See Her Elected, and Lorraine Cunningham, Coordinator with NCCWN Blayney Blades. So before we meet our fantastic panellists, I'm just going to tell you a little about what we'll be talking about tonight. The purpose is to discuss the importance of women's voices being heard in the decision-making process at local level, at national Irish level, and at European levels. And we're going to discuss at all levels how we can, put best practice into place from local right through to national, to European and international level. So we're going to have panellists from democracies, I suppose, that operate at all these levels, discussing these issues, telling us their experience and looking for questions from you, the audience. I'd urge you to send in questions whenever you have something that you want to know more about or you want to raise an issue. This whole event is part of a much wider Europe-wide event, all right? It's part of the Conference on the Future of Europe, and that's a hybrid online event, and it's happening now and in the coming months all over Europe. It's being run by the European Parliament, the Council and the European Commission, and they've created an opportunity for all the 27 member states and citizens in those states to engage in debate on the challenges and priorities in order to create a Europe fit for the future. So we want your interaction, we want your feedback, we want your comments. As part of the conference process, there's a multilingual digital platform in place. The address for that is probably coming up in your message section now. It's futureu.europa.eu. That would all be at the end of the screen when this webinar is finished. And that is live for the duration of this conference. So it's on at the moment, it's running over the next few months, and all the events that are happening are on that particular website. And it's giving EU citizens a chance to get input on all the various different topics and areas and issues that are being raised on that website. So all the contributions are going to be collected, they're going to be analysed, and they'll be put into the European Citizens Panels and Conference Plenary event, and then they'll be discussed and a report issued on the findings, and that will give a directive of where EU policies should go in the coming years. So tonight is part of that. So what we're talking about tonight will be on that virtual platform for other European countries and citizens to see what we discussed tonight, and hopefully they can learn from that and we can learn by looking at their events. And again, a reminder that there's a question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. That's open the whole time during our panel discussion, and we encourage questions from you. So anyway, enough from me. I'm sure you're dying to meet our panellists. So I'm going to hand you over to our first panelist this evening, Maria Walsh, MEP for Midlands Northwest. Welcome, Maria.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm just going to give a brief intro into who I am and where I'm coming from, but may I just first say there needs to be more all-female panels, there needs to be more conversations like this, and ultimately, as Maeve just outlined there, we need to hear from voices like you and I, like all our panelists out there, to really engage and talk and share ideas and thoughts that they have on where our European Union is going, particularly for women, both as the candidate, as a politician, and as a community member, and also to, hopefully inspire one or two to, if not more, to get people to put up their hand and begin to run. As I said, my name, and as Maeve kindly introduced me, my name is Maria. I'm 34, currently virtually connecting in from a small village called Shrule, just on the border between Mayo and Galway. So a real representation, I think, tonight of Midlands Northwest constituency, which is where I represent. So for anybody tuning in and learning about the European Parliament and politics as a whole tonight for the first time, the constituency of Midlands Northwest covers Galway to Mayo, or Galway and Mayo, Galway to Donegal, Mayo across to Louth, so 13 big, broad, diverse counties. The reason I got involved in politics is, well, basically a couple of years ago, I looked around and I realised, A, we're not seeing young women come through the political spectrum. I didn't hear other voices out there. I didn't see and hear people talk about the ambition they might have for the constituency of Midlands Northwest. And as someone who grew up in an environment where activism and community work was so important, that's fundamentally a part of my DNA, is to give back and work within the community in a volunteer capacity. I realized, why didn't I put up my hand? And I had to have a serious hard look at myself to see if I'm comfortable sitting in the armchair and being an armchair activist. And for me, it became frustrating. I became tired of the status quo. And I quickly had a realization that if I'm not willing to put my hand up and get involved, then how can I expect things to change? And fundamentally, I believe if we do not have community voices in our political landscape, be it local, regional, national, European, or otherwise, then what will change? Our community has to reflect in our politics, and our politics has to reflect in our community. And I think up to this point, this is why we've had such a disconnection between both. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation tonight. To give you a little bit of background into the committees I sit on in the European Parliament, one's Employment and Social Affairs, the other is Culture and Education, and my final one is the Liberties, Home Affairs and Justice. All three committees are quite big, robust, and different, but have a lot of different crossover also. So equality is very important to me, particularly women and other diverse candidates, and the viewpoints and the lives that they want to live. Equally, access to better education from a younger age right up to this lifelong learning message that is coming from the European Parliament, which I'm excited about, that we don't just stop learning when secondary school finishes or college. We also are constantly learning about new things and how to develop and explore. Hence the reason why it's very exciting that we have all various ages tonight, because that means that we're all lifelong learners, and we might jump into getting involved in politics, be it as the candidate or as a support team member for the candidate. For me, my access to politics wasn't direct and certainly wasn't easy in all areas. I didn't grow up in party politics. As I said, I grew up in the community and supporting the community, from church gate collections to sweeping community centres, to even playing GAA, which is probably one of our biggest forms of volunteerism in this country. I gifted myself after working on a number of big campaigns like the marriage referendum, trying to encourage people to get involved in voting in the repeal of the 8th, and I worked on the conference that honoured the survivors of the Magdalene laundries, and it was really after that and a couple of other things that were happening in the world, like what was going on in the United States, particularly in 2016, that I figured out how am I going to learn a little bit more about this big bad world of politics and I felt like I needed a little bit of grasp. So I gifted myself to a one-day seminar by Women for Election, and I realized how, if I could get my head around what quotas were, what a kitchen cabinet was, what type of issues I felt were really impactful, and how to build teams and talk to people, that would really benefit me. Bear in mind, I had been introduced to the public a little bit in 2014 as the International Rose of Tralee. So I was really fortunate to feel comfortable in my own body, and I wasn't nervous about walking into rooms and introducing myself. So I really felt that if I could just align the stars, get my stuff together, that I could potentially run. I don't know if I ever envisioned winning a seat, but I certainly wanted to trial and error and really get involved and make my voice heard and my vote count. And again, get off the armchair and actually get active within the world of politics. Fast forward a couple of years, and I'm really honoured and delighted, and I've tried to grow into the role of member of the European Parliament. as I mentioned before, representing Midlands Northwest. Every day is a school day. Because I didn't grow up in politics, I'm learning, even to this day, just how different political systems work, not even just the EU institutions, like the Commission, the Parliament and the Council, but here on a national level too. And I'm sure I'm coming very close to my 5 minutes of wrap-up time, but I just want to stress, and you're going to hear it throughout, that fundamentally, we need more and more women involved. And I'm not saying this because I see the need for a balanced gender quota, not at all. We actually need to have other voices at the table. So issues like childcare, like access to better education, like community development, like ambition for the constituency or the county that you grew up in, is certainly thriving, and we need to hear your voice. And I'm, again, really excited to learn, listen and engage. And Maeve, thanks very much for the warm introduction.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Maria. God, I'm exhausted already listening to that. I mean, just the whole range of experience you have. I think you've raised a lot of issues, Maria, that I'm sure will come up again in questions. And just to echo what you said, an all-female panel is fantastic. And I might add that our backroom team is all female as well. Now, our next panelist that I'd like to introduce you to this evening is Uremeu Adejinmi, and she is Mayor of Longford and Chairperson of the Longford Africans Network. Uremeu, you're very, very welcome this evening.
Thanks very much, Niamh. I'm so delighted to be able to share this platform with such incredible ladies. Hello, everyone. My name is Uremeu Adejinmi. I am the current Mayor of Longford Municipal District. And I suppose before I talk about and share my experience in politics, I just want to say that, you know, in summary, my experience has been largely positive. It's been hugely empowering to myself, my family, to, you know, the African community and to the migrant community, and indeed to the Native community as well. I feel incredibly fortunate to have this platform. I have super proud parents. My father calls me every time he no longer calls me by my first name. He starts his conversation by "Hello, Mayor. How's the mayor today?" So that is indeed something. So in terms of my experience and my journey into politics, I was invited to join the Fianna Fáil party in 2016 by my neighbour who you know, approached me and asked me to join the party and get active in politics. And prior to that, I've been a huge community advocate, just like Maria. And I just love getting involved in the community. And since I moved to Ireland and made Ireland my home, I got very involved to learn the Irish culture, to interact with my neighbours and friends, to be able to guide my children, to be able to integrate in the community when they go to school and during their sports. So I've always been very engaged in the community at different levels. So when I was invited to join a political party, I felt this is another opportunity for me to integrate with another cohort in my community. So I got stuck in. I attended everything from CDCs to call counter meetings to common meetings. I went everywhere. If they're having fundraisers, Churchgate collections, if there's a party convention, I am putting in my contribution to get on the bus. I'm going down there, clearing my diary. And, I was very, very happy to be involved. And I made such good friends in there as well. And I suppose from 2016 up to 2018, then my passion and my interest was noticed, and again I had the support of some NGOs as well. I was fortunate enough to complete a 4-month intensive training organised by the Immigrant Council of Ireland, where I shadowed a local councillor for 4 months and wrote a diary of my experience. And in that during that internship, I discovered that a lot of the issues that are affecting us as migrants and affecting members of the African community, a lot of these issues can be addressed. And I got involved in a intercultural working group in Longford, and they were looking at an intercultural integration strategy for the county. And to my surprise, there were lots of community groups and government departments talking about this service, this support that's available. And I'm sitting there thinking, these are the supports and services that we are, crying that we don't have access to. So I knew that it was an issue of we didn't have the right information, we didn't have the links to get access to these services, and that was the birth of the Longford Africans Network. And we then started, disseminating information. And we started collaborating with other migrant groups as well. So we had events run with the Polish community, we had events run with Romanian communities, and we started growing. So when it came down to 2019 then, and I was put on the ballot to run, it was a huge experience, like it was a huge exposure as well, like coming out from a private life of, working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and then, my weekend is mine, to becoming, a public figure and a public representative. So it took a while to adapt to that, but, it was all for, to get more, I suppose, representation for members from the minorities, from the new Irish community. And so unfortunately, I didn't get elected in 2019, but I didn't let that stop me. I continued to be an advocate. I continued to work with my party colleagues and elected reps. And sure enough, in 2020, then I got another go at it, and I was co-opted onto the Longford County Council. And shortly after my co-option, I was elected Lasca Herlock of Longford Municipal District. So, like, I hit the ground running essentially, and or you could say I was thrown in the deep end, whichever. But I took it all in my stride, because I knew that somebody's benefiting from this. And what it has also done, my journey into politics, it has increased awareness among migrant groups of political activism, and COVID, and we can see around the world that governments are at the forefront of driving the countries out of the pandemic. So it's even more glaring, the importance of being politically active. So yeah, working in the community. Unfortunately, 2 weeks after I was co-opted, and I was looking forward to going back on the road and meeting people. Sure, we went into lockdown and everything went online, so it was all remote. And then fast forward to 23rd of June this year, I was elected mayor of Longford Municipal District. And, there was such a huge reaction to that from the Longford community, from the Ireland community, and from the global community. And I have to say, the reaction, even on the internet, was largely positive, which I was very, very happy to see. And I just want to stress that it is so important for people to see themselves in all walks of life, to be encouraged, particularly for our young ones who are making their way in life and trying to figure out what careers they will go for. And the more they see themselves in different aspects in different sectors, the more they are empowered, the more they feel fortunate to have the opportunity, and the more they feel, like they can go for absolutely anything. And I just want to stress that, just like Maria said, there's so many problems, and it's easy to point out problems. But what I want to encourage is, if you see a problem, then it is on you to find a solution. I got the opportunity to become active in politics, and it has had such a huge impact in the community. And I'm so, like I said, so fortunate to have this platform, and I continue to work hard. And if anybody's from the Longford constituency in the audience, hello and good evening. Get in touch if you have any issues, and it's so important to have more female voices in decision making, because we know what affects us, and if our voices aren't there, we're not going to be able to find the solutions to the issues that affect us. Thank you.
Uremeu, thanks very much for that. That's definitely a call for action. If something is wrong or there's an issue, don't wait for someone else to fix it. See that how you can fix it yourself or with other people. So that's certainly going to take that away with me this evening. And I'm sure, I know all our panelists have the same attitude, as I'm sure I hope a lot of the audience do as well. Our next panelist tonight that we're going to meet is Dr. Michelle Marr, who's the project manager with See Her Elected. Michelle, you're very, very welcome this evening.
Thank you very much, Maeve, and hello everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm coming to you from Mullingar, where I live, but I'm originally from Donegal town. So the European elections are actually the only time myself and my father get to fight about who we're voting for, because we're both in the same constituency. And I suppose when I was trying to prepare for tonight and how best to kind of describe what See Her Elected is trying to do, I kind of fixated, I suppose, in a little bit on the word democracy. And even if we would find it a hard word to define, we would all, I think, understand that fundamentally it's something good and it's something positive and it's something we might even fight for. And if you were asked to give an example of, you know, what it might look like if there's a lack of democracy, I mean, you might think about the women and children under the Taliban in Afghanistan, or I suppose the entire Russian population who only ever get to seem to get to vote for one man. But I wondered, would women in rural Ireland necessarily think that they too are on the receiving end of a lack of democracy? Perhaps not, but I'd argue that we are. Because when you look at our county councils and in See Her Elected, our sole focus is on local government. When you look at our county councils pretty much all over the country, men time and time again are overrepresented. You look at Galway, where there's 32 men and only 7 women councillors in there. Monaghan, only 3 women councillors. Uremeu is just one of 2 county councillors who are women in Longford. You take a county like Leitrim, and in the whole history of Leitrim County Council since the beginning of the state, there's only ever been 6 women elected to Leitrim County Council. So that's what I would quote if I was saying that the women in rural Ireland are, you know, we are too on the receiving end of a lack of democracy. And the whole idea of democracy is that the people, or, you know, any representative body, be it the Dáil, be it our county councils, or be it the European Parliament, it should be a microcosm of the population that it represents. It should look like us, and at the very least, it should be 50% male, 50% female, and that same argument goes for any minority grouping that you want to present an argument for, that our councils, our Dáil, and our European Parliament should look like us. And that was really the catalyst for See Her Elected to be set up. It's a grassroots, community-led, very much working off the principles of community education. And it's the first political programme to directly connect with women in rural Ireland, focusing on increasing the number of women in our county councils. So how do we go about that? How do we see ourselves as strengthening democracy in Ireland? Well, what See Her Elected does is that we engage with women in their communities through what we call See Her Elected, or She School. And what She School is, it's free online classes which cover public policy, covers politics, covers economics, and it covers participation. For example, we have an introduction to politics class, and over 3 classes, we work through really trying to demystify local government. Who does what in the council, and what's the council actually responsible for, and how much power does a county council have compared to the national government. We work very hard to promote active citizenship, and we look and we explore the barriers to women to participating in active citizenship and in politics. So we work very hard to try and create a very welcoming, a very relaxed learning environment, but at the same time, we are instilling women with knowledge, with confidence, and with skills to consider not only running for election in the local elections, but also to feel themselves well equipped to get behind a woman candidate as part of a campaign team, because I actually think that the women who are sitting at the kitchen table behind a candidate are as equally as important as trying to help more women into our county councils. And also, we spent a good bit of time talking about our public participation networks. Quite a lot of the women who will come into She School haven't heard about public participation networks before. So we're encouraging women to participate in decision making in local government through joining in with the public participation networks. And we are, I suppose we try and be really responsive to what women who are coming into She School are telling us. And more as when we're kind of working through various programs that we have and learning and actually kind of getting past the I don't really know anything about politics bit, they started to ask different questions. And one that was coming up with increasing frequency, which was really wonderful, was sort of you're kind of lighting wee fires all around the Northwest and the Midlands here. So, you know, what are you going to do about it and where do you start? You know, if you're not from a political party, you're not from a political family, you're working there in the community, you can see everything that needs to be done, and you feel your county council, as Uremeu was there, we know what affects us. We don't want a lot of men in the county council to be trying to guess what that is. So in response to that, we've actually written a guidebook. It's the See Her Elected Guide to Running in the Local Elections. Again, a very practical document that we are launching at the end of October, and then putting a set of workshops in place with it, you know, to try and overcome a lot of those barriers that women see and feel when they start to think about politics. So I'm very happy to answer some more questions on that maybe later on in the panel. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michelle. I mean, She School just sounds so informative and educational. And so what I really picked up from what you were saying, it's not just about women going forward towards election, it's to support women, and the network is really important too. So while some people might be shy about coming forward, if you feel passionate about issues, it doesn't mean you have to stand for election. There are roles for all of us. I think it's something that's going to come up later, is that as women, do we actually recognise the status of the work that we do in the community and the importance? And I feel very sure that will come back up again in this panel discussion. And I'm going to introduce you to our fourth panellist this evening, and that is Lorraine Cunningham. She's the coordinator and of the National Collective of Community-Based Women's Networks and of the Blayney Blades. Lorraine, you're very welcome altogether. Lorraine, just remind you to put your sound on there, please. Thanks.
Apologies. Am I okay now, Maeve?
That's perfect. Thanks, Lorraine.
Okay,
love to hear
great.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So good evening, everybody. And Maeve, thanks very much for hosting yourself there and the rest of the team that's behind this evening. And following on from Marie and Michelle and Uremeu, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm delighted to be here. I represent, as you said there, quite a mouthful, the NCCWN. So it's the National Collective of Community-Based Women's Network. And it was established in 2002. And we were working behind the scenes within the women's networks for quite a long time. And in 2011, in response to policy changes within we saw the merger of all these projects coming together, 17 groups. And the 17 groups are quite a range and diverse group. And I'll just give you a brief overview. So there's ourselves, who is Blayney Blades Women's Group, based in Monaghan. Docus for Women, also based in Monaghan. Donegal Women, NCCWN, Roscommon, Leitrim, Clare Morris, Clare, South Kerry, Limerick, Waterford, Wexford, Mullingar, Dundalk and Lucan, Ronanstown, Rolla, Dunleary, Rathdown and Tala. So we're quite around the country, and we do hope that maybe going forward we will incorporate the rest of the counties. So we've been working mainly in participation, engagement and policy and equality work with women for the last, for myself, 25 years. I'm working with Blayney Blades Women's Group for 14 years, and we deliver lots and lots of training courses. I myself live in County Meath. I'm based in County Monaghan, where we deliver all our programmes, and we're very happy that this is a unique programme. So I suppose very basically who is NCCWN working for and who? We work for grassroots women. We encourage women who maybe are looking for second-time chances for education, or maybe who stayed out of the workplace for quite a long time, to come back and empower them, encourage them to build their self-esteem. So through all our courses and development work and pre-development work, this encouragement allows them, if they choose, to go back to further education or to participate in the workplace. We represent 17 national women's organisations, as I've said, and we empower women at a local level. So the local part is very important because there is the 17 groups and we're all diverse. So I speak for myself in Monaghan, which is quite a rural based community. And what works in Monaghan certainly wouldn't work in Dublin, or what would work in Dublin wouldn't work in Monaghan. So it's very good that because there's the 17 groups that we're able to come together and support each other and lobby for the issues that's important to us. What can be done by NCCWN alone is to support these women. They don't get this kind of support from any other group. We're unique in the delivery of our programmes of the pre-development work. We say, like, do we support all women? Some women, which women? We support all women. All women must be included. Older women living in poverty, lone parents, girls who have no access to education, new communities and all others. So by doing that, we support all the groups. So last year, with the help of Monaghan County Council and the Social Inclusion Officer there, Bernie Bradley, we set up the Women's Assembly. And we put out a call to all the women in Monaghan to come together and support their women of Monaghan. Because the view of setting up the Women's Assembly in Monaghan was to get women involved in political life. As some of the other speakers have said there this evening, it's very hard to get women involved, both local, nationally, and then into Europe. So on March 8, 2021, the aim of the Monaghan Women's Assembly was to bring the voice of local women into local government in County Monaghan. The Monaghan Women's Assembly provided a platform for local women to raise and discuss issues that impact on their lives with the members of Monaghan County Council, and to, most importantly, ensure there was going to be gender equality. We're all very aware of the lack of gender equality within Ireland, and I know it's a worldwide issue, I'm well aware of that. But for us going forward, we need to support the younger women who would like the opportunity to participate both locally, nationally, and into Europe. And Marie there, like, you're a perfect example, Marie. We, through NCCWN and Blayney Blades, have worked very closely with your predecessors, Marion Harkin and Mairead McGuinness, and they give us great support. The minister who's based in Monaghan there, Heather Humphrey, also gives us great support. Cathy Bennett and Aoife McCooey, who sit on Monaghan County Council, are a huge support. So we're lucky, I suppose, in one way in County Monaghan, that through Monaghan County Council, we've had the opportunity to set up the Monaghan Women's Assembly. So last year we undertook a consultation to gauge the impact COVID-19 had on the Monaghan. And it was an opportunity to document the experience for future generations and to highlight areas for consideration by local and national government for post-COVID-19. And using the significant anecdotal evidence from NCC, Docus for Women and NCC Blayney Blades in our day-to-day work with local women through the COVID-19 pandemic, we compiled a very short survey. And the impact of that survey was, just within the Monaghan area, was 618 individual submissions were received, which is really, really good response, because, you know, when you do SurveyMonkey and all those other surveys, sometimes you don't have that high percentage of documentation. 575 of these submissions were made to the NCC group. So that was Docus for Women, were Ursula McKenna and Lynn McElvanny there, and ourselves in Blayney Blades. And the other 43 submissions were made to Monaghan County Council. We focused on women working in the front line or essential services, women working in other areas of employment, women with children, women parenting alone, women who are carers, women with a disability, women from the ethnic minorities, including traveller women, and women living in direct provision, and younger women aged 16 to 18, and of course, our older women. And Blayney Blades are very, very proactive in working with the Older People's Council and the Age Friendly, which is also extremely supported by Monaghan County Council. So while there is an inequality throughout a lot of places, I suppose Blayney Blades is lucky where we're based with the support we get from our local networks. The PPN are a huge support, Leona MacDonald there, Leona Keenan, and Leona is a great source of resources, because through our projects, we find our resources can be quite limited. So with a view to that, we're very lucky that we work so closely with Monaghan. So I suppose that's kind of us. There's loads more we can go on and talk about tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have about NCCWN / Blayney Blades / Docus for Women. And that's me. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And lots of information there as well, Lorraine. I was particularly struck about when you were doing the survey there, was last year, that the idea of, so as women collecting local information, we've got lots of national statistics, but I think it's really interesting if people are collecting it themselves, or there's that more local detail, and so it's that stake in it with your 618 people in the seminar. Now you mentioned the PPN too, and yeah. I know that other speakers have mentioned it. And it's funny just to tell you what was Uremeu was saying about, you know, when you got involved in politics, you realised there was all these supports here that you didn't necessarily realise were there. So before we open up our discussion for further questions, there's lots coming in now from our audience. Leona is here from the PPN. Leona Keane is the PPN resource worker, and she's going to tell us a bit about the PPN. Thanks, Leona.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I am the resource worker and manager of Monaghan Public Participation Network. So the PPNs were established back in 2014, and their purpose is to facilitate the representation and participation of communities in local decision making. There is a PPN in every county across the country. And we have 3 core functions, which include consultation, representation, and then information. In the consultation end, we would regularly gather our community volunteers together, and we would consult on a local policy or plan. And we have often then inputted into national policy and planning. The representation involves community volunteers representing all of our member groups on Monaghan County Council's decision-making committees. And that's legislated for. Every county council committee must have community representation on that. And then the sharing of information. It's my job to make sure that our members are kept up to date on all the resources available to them, such as funding opportunities, free training, and county council events, and then other local activities. But the PPN also allows like-minded people to come together, connect, and learn from each other. And for those of you from other counties here this evening, I urge you to find out about your local PPN and get involved where you can. We are very fortunate that in County Monaghan we have such a strong community spirit. And there are now 580 community and voluntary organisations registered with the Monaghan PPN today, which is one of the largest representations in the country. These groups represent environmental, social inclusion and community sectors. But involving people in decisions that affect them and their lives is a core principle of democracy. But really, participation isn't just about voting. It is about local people coming together, being heard, and their suggestions being considered by the decision makers. And in County Monaghan, we do this extremely well. We have 35 community representatives who sit across 13 of Monaghan County Council's committees. 17 of these are female, many of whom I know are logged on here this evening. And they are strong women, women who come from environmental organisations, local resource centres, women's organisations, mental health organisations, domestic violence centre. And they are all committed to ensuring that at every opportunity, gender equality and women's issues are on the council agenda. Some women use the opportunity of becoming a PPN representative and sitting around the table and getting experience of sitting at that table with county councillors, senior management from the county council and other organisations. And they then take the next leap into running for local election. However, the same barriers exist for female representation on the PPN as they do in local politics. Very often women want to go for a particular seat on a committee, but they can't due to work, childcare and caring responsibilities. But hopefully, following tonight's session and the feedback to the EU on the ongoing work of the Monaghan Women's Assembly, change for women to participate is closer than we might think. And just to finish off, I'm going to put my details into the chat function so that if anybody here this evening is interested in getting involved in our local public participation network and becoming a representative, I will be more than happy to guide you and have a chat with you in relation to that. And thank you for having the PPN here this evening.
Fiona, thank you very much for that. That was very informative. And again, opportunities there, just straight. Anybody who wants to be involved in the PPN, contact Leona. The details are up there. Now, Leona, you did mention, I suppose, some barriers to women getting involved in the PPN. So I'm going to maybe look at that as I open this discussion now up to the wider panel. I think we can see everybody on screen. And again, it's questions coming up from the audience here. So I suppose to summarise the comments coming in from the audience in one area. I'm going to put this question to Lorraine first, I suppose, as a grassroots person. What do you think are the key issues that deter women from participating actively in politics? Or if Lorraine is, does anybody want, are you there, Lorraine? Are you unmuted? We can get, do you know what I'm going to move that over to, oh, Lorraine, are you ready?
Yes, sorry.
Great, I know you're fine.
Okay, sorry, Maeve, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure, yeah. What do you think are the key issues that deter women from getting involved in politics?
Okay, so I suppose there's a number of issues and there's a broad spectrum, but I suppose if you wanted to be really short and snappy about it, the key barriers are childcare, women caring in the home, women who don't get the opportunities in education. There's loads of barriers that come to these women, like where the men exceed all the time and the women take the career break, and there's just the lack of accessibility. In Blayney Blades, we have done numerous courses supporting women, educating them, giving them the opportunity to go back and maybe look at re-educating themselves to get back into local politics. But because these barriers always present themselves, it's the inequality there and the access to the women. It's just not, it doesn't happen, Maeve, you know. And so we've through our research, we say you can either have there's two things you can have in life. You can either have a career or you can have a family. But trying to marry the two together for women is very, very difficult. Men seem to find this much easier approach in political life. And I don't know how, in all we've done and all the support we do, how we can really get these girls to engage from an early age, educate them while giving them to support to work both locally, nationally and in Europe. So I don't know, maybe Maria or somebody might have something else to say on that.
Yeah, maybe Maria, you have something to say, and then we might come to Michelle, just from the point of view of see her elected. You might have some answers to the questions that Lorraine has posed. But Maria, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, for sure, Maeve, and thanks, Lorraine, for passing the torch over. Actually, and I should have added in my few opening words. I call myself an alumni of See Her Elected also, because it was after I got elected and I wanted to really understand local politics and hear from the doctor herself. So I learned a hell of a lot about how networking is really important. And feeding into your question, Maeve, I think confidence is a huge issue. I think cash is also a huge issue. And to Lorraine's point, childcare also. For me personally, I didn't know how to get in it as someone who didn't grow up in it. And I always assumed if you showed up to a political meeting, or you even showed up to understand a little bit about politics, be it at local or whatever level, that you were already automatically hooked into that party. So it was really difficult for me to figure out where to go and how to, how to see myself within a political spectrum. I think that's what's so important about See Her Elected and the likes of Women for Election and Northwest 50/50. It gives women the space to explore, to gain the confidence, to gain the low-hanging fruit, just to understand enough to get into thinking about where to go. I mean, I think I can only speak from my own experience. For me, it was confidence. Even though I was so fortunate, I had come from a public role like the roles at Tralee and never really went away, unfortunately, for many people. But for me, it was having, I guess, the 5-point or the 10-point plan of what I could offer to a party. Whereas now, on a daily basis, I'm growing into my own power. And I think that's really important, and vulnerability around politics is missing. That's why we have quite a broken system. The vulnerability piece was, well, hang on a second. I actually offer a lot to a party or the political spectrum. But if you asked me that 2 years ago, hell, if you asked me that 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to say that outright and sit confidently and comfortably within that. Whereas if you look at school runs, if you look at the gates of community centres, if you look at the sidelines of football pitches or sports, if you look at who is at these events, it's women. Their network is phenomenal. And if we could inject some confidence into seeing, actually, I do have a financial person to run my campaign. I do have a social media person to support me. I do have a savvy writer who can write some press releases about me. I have my kitchen cabinet. I just don't know how to see it through the lens and the prism of politics, and that's what we need to change. And to Michelle's point, I think the likes of See Her Elected and all the organizations that support women in that confidence piece is phenomenal. Conversations like this is hopefully a seed gets planted tonight, and we see we have 3 years to local elections and European elections, and I think this is the time now to look around the rooms and say, right, let's get one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Michelle, do you want to add to that in the context of, I suppose, your experience with See Her Elected? And again, I suppose in giving answers as well as identifying the problems or potential solutions, restorative solutions.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything Lorraine and Maria was saying there. I would have mentioned confidence as well. That idea that women won't put themselves forward because they think they have to know absolutely everything before and I couldn't possibly be a politician because I don't understand transport policy or economics or whatever it is. I do think that traditional role, that traditional view of women's social role in the family, it still prevails. And it's easy to see how that can happen because I'm always saying you can't be what you can't see. And Sarah McInerney was on the Late Late Show, and she said her abiding memory of the pandemic was men at podiums. And I agree with her. And it seems like that replicated in political institutions up and down the country, that reinforces this idea that somehow politics is a job for the boys. And in See Her Elected, we say we're having none of that. We're going to equip you with political knowledge so that you'll have the confidence to say, yeah, I do know this stuff. And women, what hasn't been mentioned as well is that women tend to wait to be asked to run for election. I don't know if that was the case for Uremeu and Maria. So they lose out on valuable preparation time. So, we're asking women now, if you even have the remotest passing interest in local politics, get in touch and come and do some of the stuff that we're doing. And, it's that point that you're making, so it was made earlier about women in the community. They think they don't know anything about politics, but that's despite them being on every single committee and every parents association and every residents association and the first to volunteer. And that's what would make them ideal councillors, because they are at the coalface of day-to-day life in a community. And I would just love more women to see that.
Thanks, Michelle. It's interesting, isn't it, the language that we use, you know, what you were saying there, that women maybe feel they're not always qualified to become involved in politics. Yet when you look at all they're doing, what it's called, oh, doing a school run or organising a committee or joining that club. But it's you know, maybe is there a piece of work around the language of the work we're doing? And again, this question has come up from the audience, that how do we encourage women to recognise their activities as equal worth to their male counterparts, particularly in the community and voluntary activities? And I'm going to ask you about that, Uremeu, because I think you have a lot of experience in that area before you became elected.
Yes, Maeve. And before I answer that, if I can just add one thing to the barriers. I think one of them is stereotyping, and that's down to unconscious bias, and some of that is down to the media messaging. When politics is being published or talked about in the media, we see male faces dominating the conversations, and that kind of sends a message that this is not the space for you. So that can affect women as well. And speaking on behalf of members of the New Irish community, people feel excluded as well. So those are some of the barriers. If you don't see it, you can't even think of it. And again, I use COVID as an example when they're talking about, you know, when they're interviewing virologists and immunologists, you see it's predominantly male, predominantly Irish, and we think of, you know, when you go to your GP or when you go to the hospital, you see there's diversity in there in terms of the consultants, the doctors, the nurses, the carers. But when it's time for the spotlight, you only see certain faces, certain genders, and I think that adds to that mental picture as well. I don't know if that is done deliberately to make people feel this place doesn't belong to you, but we need to start challenging the media on how they share these messages. And if I come down to how women can do that, it's just, you know, having the belief in themselves. And I say to, whenever I'm on panels or whenever I'm invited to speak, I say public reps don't have all the answers. Half the time it's members of the community, it's the people that come up with the ideas, and we just take them and run with it and get them implemented. So, you know, one person is plenty to make change happen. Support again is vital. I learned that in a workshop, and like Maria, I'm a graduate of the CHAR elected school as well. I attended many a training and many a seminar, and I'm thankful to Dr. Michelle Marr and the team for you know, their unwavering support for women. One vital thing is having a support network around you as well. Like, you know, women, we move in packs. Apparently, even from when we are, I think even at the time of what's it now? When the sperm meets the egg, apparently the female X chromosome, they travel in packs. So I was taught. So I think we have that sorted, and so, you know, we can lean on our support group, on our support network, and that is powerful as well. And it's something that I think part of my journey was spurred on by my friend, because I was always very vocal about, you know, current affairs and what's going on in the town and in the country, and, you know, always very passionate about, you know, I know how this can work, or just sharing my opinion. And a friend of mine saw the Immigrant Council training program and sent me the link. That's how I applied. That's how I got on the program. So again, sharing your ideas, sharing your goals, your passions, your with your friends is also good. And as a friend, if you hear a friend, you know, talking about stuff, or you see them able to attain a leadership position, you know, support them, encourage them, and be there for them, because the journey of politics it's very tough. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of hurdles and very few wins. And, you know, we need that support, especially when we're going through those hurdles. to make sure that to keep being motivated. So those are two, you know, vital pieces. I think that I don't want to, you know, hog the answers, so that you know, more of the lovely speakers can share that as well.
Okay, thanks, Lorraine. Well, we'll be going around to everybody several times anyway. So that's what I'm hearing you saying there, is that the idea of women validating each other and supporting each other and encouraging each other is really, really important from the perspective of getting them to recognise that the work they're doing is important, while they might not recognise that themselves. Would anybody like to comment on that? Or we have it said. Okay, I'm going to move on. There's actually well, first of all, we just comments here saying thanks very much for just hearing such strong women's voices this evening, which they are, and I hope that you'll inspire some other stronger women's voices. I have a question here, just generally wondering about people who are elected representatives. How do you manage? I mean, this is, I suppose, from a practical point of view, and we talked about, you know, women having issues or needing support around the areas of childcare and stuff like that. But how do you go through sort of, if you're doing a 9 to 5 job on, you know, Monday to Friday, you're on call at weekends because you're an elected representative. How do you juggle all that, and what sort of supports do you need in undertaking that work? I'll ask you, Maria, first, and then we might come back to our other elected representatives. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really fortunate in the sense of my full-time job is being a member of the European Parliament. It's very different for local council representatives. I'll also add, be it fortunate, outside of these 2 Highland heifers that I recently purchased. They're my new adoptee children, if anybody follows farming. But so for me, you know, my accountability lies with the constituents I represent versus having a home life. I have spoken with many female MEPs, you know, I mean, our now Commissioner Maeve McGuinness. I think at one point she was pregnant with twins, running for election, if not recently being elected. And I couldn't imagine just the difficulties of trying to find a balance, because for me, I leave, you know, my home house at 2 a.m. on a Monday morning. I drive to Dublin Airport and I am in Brussels for Monday morning, Tuesday, Wednesday, and fly back and try and cover the constituency Thursday to Sunday then. So I couldn't imagine having a balance of a person or dependent. So in that sense, I'm extremely fortunate. I will say though, running into the campaign, you know, I was working as a self-employed a freelancer and trying to scramble as much cash myself to try and make sure that I could even get my head in the race and get involved. And that was really difficult because you know, you have covering the constituency like I do, and trying to, not having grown up in politics, you're trying to get into rooms with decision makers that, you know, to share your personality and get a little bit of buzz about who you are and why you wanted to run, without having what I ended up having in the last couple of weeks of the campaign was a campaign bus. And that's where the support of a party certainly came in as a new candidate. And I was really fortunate that, but there was many months where it was just me, or my parents would come with me when I knew I had a long drive and I had a long drive the next day. But you know, I know others on the call definitely have dependents. But just to add, you know, with MEPs that I've spoken with, you know, some waited, and councillors and deputies, some waited until their kids were a little bit older to get involved. Some have moved their children to Brussels so that they're doing their home night Monday through Wednesday and then go back to the constituency Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and try and get a family day on the Sunday. That's not always working out, particularly in the last year running into the election and being re-elected. So it's a lot of checks and balances. But I can tell you, as a self-employed person, before I officially became a candidate, it was really difficult, because you're looking at your purse strings going, do I have enough to just keep me going for the next week or two before hopefully someone shows a little bit of appetite. I'll pass it over to other fabulous speakers.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Uremeu, I'm just going to ask you about that. I suppose, as an elected representative, how did you manage sort of your entry into politics, and what advice you'd have for for women considering entering politics in the context of your experience to date?
Yeah, I have a great support system here, and my husband Kenny, he's very hands-on as well. And I think from the go, I've always been very independent, very determined, or very intentional in how I wanted to have my married life, how to raise my children, and everything. And I wanted us to be equal partners in absolutely everything. And it has worked out, because it was I was inadvertently, setting the scene to ease myself into public life. So when I can't be there to pick up the children or drop them off at their after school activities, Kenny's there to bridge the gap. And when he's not able to, I'm there as well. I'm fortunate as my children are quite grown as well. My youngest, Alexandra, is 12, and she's 12. I was going to say she's 13. She'd love that. Her best friend turned 13, and we're having a go at her every time. She's still a child. So she's 12, she started secondary, so she's a bit independent, and she has two bigger older brothers, 16 and 18. And I think the good thing about having older ones is you want to be included in the circle. So she always acts older, and it's great for me because it's less hands-on mothering for me and parenting. So in that way, the older ones after school, they look after Alexandra as well. So I'm able to go out and be there for the residents. And to be honest, if my children were still in primary, it would really have been a challenge, and maybe I would have thought long and hard about it again, because of how we were raised to feel like the woman is in charge of the home. And I tried to go away from that. Hopefully my daughter doesn't see herself as the primary carer in the home, and if she does, then I have to question myself and how I've performed as a parent. But yeah, and I know, like, I leaned on the crashes and after school club a lot when I was working 9 to 5, because obviously I had to go in at 9 and come back at 5. So I had a structure there where they'd be dropped off in school, and the crash would pick the kids up and take them to the crash, and I'd pick them out after work, and it was just hectic. And I think, again, that helped me prepare me for public life as well, because it's just as hectic, because I've swapped children for constituents, so and they're equally demanding. So but I just love being able to help, and it makes the whole difference. One big thing that I've had to come to terms with is the invasion into your private life, and my private Facebook is no longer private, because I get so many requests, particularly from people in the local community, and I know they just want to have access. So my Facebook page is now largely public. So I miss that, having to put on private thoughts, and I can't imagine a constituent reading a cryptic post or just thinking back into some time in the past and going, what's this one on? So I miss that as well, and that's just my only and I'm not a diary keeper, a personal diary keeper. I wish I was. Then I would have just swapped to keeping a diary of my thoughts. But yeah, that's how I transitioned from 9 to 5 to being a full-time public rep.
Okay, so busy time, a lot of management needed, and again, you've mentioned just the importance of support network. I think what's coming through for me personally this evening is, when I'm a mother of 2 kids, I work, I'm self-employed, whatever, but I would never see myself as an elected representative, but I'd see myself supporting somebody. And I don't know about anybody else in the audience, but what's really coming through to me is that there are roles for someone like me in women having their voices heard and having issues raised that are relevant to women and other organisations. I just think it's important to remember that you don't have to be the one standing on the podium. Like you were saying, this is the first time I've heard this, I suppose, the kitchen cabinet expression. I think that's, we can all be, I'll be a spoon or a spatula or whatever, or a wooden spoon sometimes, but there's space and there's a role for everybody. I think as women, we're particularly good in including people and actually being able to pick out, well, who'd be good at this, and bringing out the best in our fellow citizens when we're looking for support. I'm going to widen this out just a little bit now. We've been talking about this was very much about quite locally based stuff and very, very specific to the personal experiences. But generally, I suppose, talking about policies and that, I'm going to put this question to you, Lorraine, and then we widen it out. Just your comment on what changes you think need to happen in Ireland and in Europe to encourage more women to participate in the democratic process.
Well, as I said previously, Maeve, there, you know, and the girls then brought the other into it, the confidence and the self-esteem, primarily the lack of support, I suppose, for women, the encouragement, the role that's perceived as a men's role, the boys' club. And that's what comes across very much in political life. Like, we have 22.5% women in political life at the moment. That's just over a fifth. So you've 5 times more men than women in every political arena. So I'm not sure about Europe, you know, but I suppose I looked at and I listened there when Urena and the girls were talking. Last year, Blayney Blades and Docus were invited by Audrey Carville onto RT1 Morning Ireland. And we got to talk about things that are the inequalities to women. And I did a small bit of homework for that. And what I said that morning was, all of the family carers, there's 355,000 family carers. They save Ireland 10 billion each year. Primarily, they're all women. On that particular morning when we were in Cavan doing that show on air, the young girls and the women from the local childcare groups were getting on buses to go to Dublin. This was just immediately prior COVID. And I was looking through my own AGM report, and that's a picture of us in Cavan last year with all those girls getting on those buses. So, Marie, you said a very valid thing, and that's what brings me into just remembering this, was the lack of cash. When people are so low paid, they're given the biggest service of minding the most important asset in the world, either through caring or through childcare, allowing the rest of us to go to work, minding those. That there's no avenue there to support those women. There's nowhere for them to go. They're stuck. So I suppose unless we get these girls in transition year and we really give them the support, the education and the introduction and the tasters for politics, and show them the platform, maybe let them mentor somebody who's already in those roles, if those younger girls. And unless we go back to the drawing board, start young, by the time people go to work, and like what the girls were saying there, run into the creche in the evening times, Urena, you said it, I've done it. My children are all grown up now and I'm okay. I can be late at work. I can go in extra early, whatever works for me. But for people who don't have those opportunities, we need as women, and probably that draws you in there, Michelle, is women and is she elected? How are we able to support these women? Where can we sit at the table and make a good plan? I know in NCCWN, we've gone over this loads of times. We've lobbied and lobbied and lobbied for resources, funding, you know, the lack of resources. The majority of our 17 groups, the majority of the coordinators, the development workers, are part-time workers. So the resources there, even for us to stay back night times to deliver classes and support people into going forward for elections, the resources are not there. So we're into another avenue there of something people, it was only when Maria said it there about cash strapped that it kind of really opened up for me then. I thought of the carers, the child carers, the people who like are working part-time and are expected to do full-time hours. You know, where is the opportunity to educate these young girls?
And actually, just as I was talking about economics and the cash needed, One of the questions here is what the panel's opinion is on the EU stance on a universal basic wage. Like, would that hugely benefit all women if there was? Michelle, do you want to comment on that? I see you nodding there.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a big fan of the universal basic wage. My background before I became involved in see her elected was well, my very first job was as a consultant in a financial services firm. I was looking after pension funds for big multinationals. So I've done that, dropping kids to creche, racing to get back to pick them up from creche and wondering what it was all about. I think, and it might actually answer the question that you said before about how, how can we recognize the activities that women are doing, all that vital unpaid work in the house, all that community and voluntary, a lot of it unpaid or poorly paid. I think pension it. I think there should be at the very least a universal pension for that recognizes that work within the home and recognizes that volunteer work that women do. But to answer the question you asked about what change needs to happen in Ireland, and just very quickly, because I'm conscious of the time, we don't have quotas for local elections. We have them for the national elections, where 30% of candidates have to be either male or female, going up to 40% at the next, I think the general election, if it happens in, I should know this, shouldn't I, 2025, I believe it is, but they're not in place for local elections. And if there was one change that should be brought in, I think that's it.
And Michelle, in relation to the pensions there, we've been having this discussion in work, but I'm just looking at a glance there, 55% of men have an average pension of €433 a week. The average woman, which is 28% of women, get €280. So there's the huge inequality again. So if we were to go into all the inequalities, we'd be here for a week. But like at a glance, when you see that, how's that about? How does that work? Why should I have 280 and the guy next door has €433? So there's huge questions for equality to be answered.
That's probably a whole other panel. Go on, Maria.
Can I just
comment from Marie on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, we're actually working in the employment committee right now on a pay transparency file. So equal pay for equal work, or work of same nature, because there's huge disparity, discrepancies between it all. And to all panelists' points of view, there is. I was doing some reading over the weekend in prep of this file, and it was the difference of pay for many women is over 14.1%. That's about 51 extra working days women do in order to catch up to what a man gets paid. 51 when you think all the annual leave or whatever else that goes with that. I do like to the point of Michelle in terms of universal pension. I don't know will we see the same wage throughout Europe, simply because our Nordic countries, when it comes to wages and payment like that at a European level, we hit a couple of stumbling blocks because it's a national competency. But I do believe in the protection of pension, in particular for women, because we would have seen it in crashes after crashes, 2007 to 2008, in particular, or even with domestic violence, it's women who leave, and then within that leaves any sort of financial supports, and it's often the pension that takes the hit the most, or they've left work due to tax issues or childcare, and they can't afford to get back into it. I did just want to add two points, if you don't mind, Maeve. And not to go too far off the point, but I think the hours of political business are absolutely astronomical. I finished a PP meeting, so a parliamentary meeting last night in Dublin at 8:30. Most of the mums had left because they have home responsibilities and another full-time job at home. A number of the men, I won't say all, headed to have pick up a coffee or a drink. I remember he was minister at the time, a huge champion for a 50-50 event in running up to the campaign, both local and European, in 2019. He had said his first political meeting was in a bar at 10 p.m. at night, where he got asked to run. When you think of that, and that's only a couple of years ago, when you think of 1973, when we joined the European community in the first place, now the European Union, one of the conditions of us to join and get us in the door was the marriage bar had to be removed. 48 years long, in speaking in this conversation, I don't know have we come as far as we need to. And if you look at the snail's pace, hence the reason why we need more women involved. And I wholeheartedly agree with Michelle in terms of, a woman cannot be asked 6 weeks or 6 months even before a local election campaign. While she might be present in the community, it's a very different networking that is needed, and we need to incorporate mentorships, traineeships, and like I call it the buddy system. So you're never walking into a meeting on your own where you don't feel empowered enough to connect with those who you need to connect with. So you're always with someone who's championing you, or just pushing you out of your boundaries, that you always have a +1 in order to do that. And it's best that it's another female who believes in you as much as there's times you need to believe in yourself. And I think there are a couple of things, but I am taking note on the universal rates, and happy to chat to anybody who asks that question in particular and wants to know more answers from a European perspective after this.
Okay. And there's a couple of questions coming up here from the audience. I'm going to try and group them together now. Bear with me because they're flying in here, or I'm reading through them. People are referencing support networks and looking for a bit more discussion around that. And that's related to what you were saying, Marie, about having your champion to go into a meeting with you. Talking about stalking as an issue for female politicians, how people deal with that. And so they're kind of two sort of part of that, those networks and supports. Would anybody like to comment on those? I suppose people are looking for practical ideas of, like, if I decide I want to get involved in politics, where next?
Yeah, I can make some comments on that in terms of support. So I have a close network of friends, and when I wanted to go on this journey, I gathered into the house, shared my ideas, got their thank God, got their support and encouragement, and they pretty much talked about how they could be of use to me in the campaign. And even now, as I'm running, I lean on them for guidance, for advice, and to assist me where necessary. My friend was my campaign manager, and obviously she knows me very well, and she'll be able to represent me, and she knows to a certain extent what my preferences as well. So that's the kind of support. And they then, obviously everybody has pockets of contacts and networks. So in their networks as well, they would be promoting me as a candidate and promoting me as a public rep. And in their engagements as well, I have my neighbors who would champion me and look out for me as well. And I suppose the parents of my children, and the parents of my friends, well, they're my friends too, but the parents of my children, those are other support networks as well. And my children are very involved in sports. That's another place where you can engage as well. So I volunteer in sports. And I think Maria mentioned it, networking is a huge way and a quick win to get as much support in the community as well. So anywhere you go to, whether you go to church, whether you go to the shops, whether you go to drop the kids at school, in sport, everywhere you're meeting people, that's an opportunity to build up support. So those are practical ways you can gather the support, and even maybe do a sample survey and just voice it out to them in those networks. What would you think? And get the response, and at least you can weigh it then to see is it a great idea or not. And I think in terms of cash, to be honest, I don't understand why elections are so expensive. Like, not even in Ireland. If you look at the United States, it is unreal, the amount of money and the way they raise funds and all. I just think election expenses should be capped. if it's capped, it's affordable to more people. You know, we don't need 300 posters. If it's capped at 100.
That's one of the questions here. What's the money going on? And you're answering that, Lorraine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, posters, leaflets, and all of that. We're talking about climate responsibility. There should be a limit to all this material that we bring up. So there are easy ways to level the playing field so that everybody has an equal opportunity. And then the bulk of it would be, you know, what are you going to deliver for the people, as opposed to, you know, bombarding people with visuals all over the town, because it is intimidating when you can only afford 20 posters and then somebody else has 100 for your one poster. There's 5 all around you, and you're pretty much, you know, invisible. So I think election spend should be capped, and at the absolute minimum. I know they could come up with an idea and say, okay, we're going to cap it at 10,000. Like, who has 10,000 to run for election? So it has to be capped at a reasonable level so that everybody has an opportunity. Everybody can see that, okay, with whatever my savings are, with a contribution from friends and well wishers, I can have a go at it. And if I just want to mention, just to the last topic that was discussed, apologies for taking us back, just to mention, in my role as a councillor, basically it involves being present at meetings, sharing my ideas, advocating for members of the community. And like Lorraine mentioned, you know, most women are volunteers. You know, most women give their time freely to do just that, to be present at these meetings, to share their ideas and to advocate, and to advocate and to be activists on local issues. So we have the skills in bucket loads to actually be credible public reps, and we just need to, you know, to switch up the thinking that, okay, if I can volunteer my time, I can be a paid volunteer, which is essentially what we are as public reps. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Uremeu. And I suppose just building what you were saying about how literally going from work you're doing voluntary and actually becoming an elected representative and being paid for it, and moving that, I suppose, further along the election line to, say, European level. We've been talking a lot this evening about what should be done, what the issues are. I'm interested, does anybody have any examples of systems or models in Europe where you can see people already, you know, women participating very equally and very fairly and according to their percentage of the population in the decision-making process? Or, you know, are there any sort of case studies or examples from Europe we can look at that maybe we could seek inspiration from, that allow women to fully participate in local decision making?
I think we have a very good example here in Ireland with the Public Participation Network that Leona referenced earlier. And, you know, we have the whole idea of the Public Participation Network. It's a flat structure. All groups in a county are invited to join it. It doesn't matter if you're a massive big GAA club or 7 women in a choir, you know, you have the same voice within the Public Participation Network. I know some of them work better than others, but the very fact that you, as a member of a community organisation, can join a Public Participation Network and then put yourself forward to sit on a county council committee that's looking at policy and making recommendations into the policy. So your voice can go from the choir or the Atlantic Swim Group or the GA club that you're in through the Public Participation Network right into the strategic policy committees in the county council. I think that that's underutilised. I don't know if it exists widely in Europe, but I think there's great potential there to get involved in decision making in your local authority without ever running for election.
Just add to that, I don't know across Europe if there is Maeve, as you said, the type of networking. To Michelle's point, I don't think there is like that type of unit across. I can certainly look at a local level to see if it is. I think one of the greatest indicators of what I will hope to be a changing tide, particularly 2024 at local and European level, which will ultimately impact national politics is the fact that we have more female politicians as prime ministers and as leaders. Some countries, and most in Europe, I think Ireland is probably one of the only last 1 or 2 countries that other countries do list systems. So in the European elections, that a party, say for instance, if Fine Gael was in another European country, Leo Varadkar, my party leader, would choose representatives, and based off where you sit on the list is the weighting of how you will get in. So the more votes go to the party, the more representatives you get in. The higher you up on the list, the more than likely you will get in. I really don't agree with that style. However, because I believe every vote should count, and and I love how we do it. I love the count centres. I love the fact that there is this rapport and people can really engage with democracy. And I would hate to see that changing. But what I do see is countries like the Netherlands, in a colleague of mine who sits on the LGBTI intergroup, who sits with Uremeu, so I sit with the EPP, Uremeu is another party, they are only allowed to sit 2 terms, and they try and use the European Parliament as an opportunity for not necessarily young candidates, but certainly established voices within their communities to gain a little bit more political acumen, but then after that 2 terms, so that's 10 years, will hopefully enter into national politics. So they do it. We're in this country over the years, and I can say this unfortunately comfortably as the youngest MEP for Ireland, that we often do it in reverse, where years ago we would have sent a retiring politician, which, listen, a politician with that acumen is fantastic, but how do we get younger people involved then in terms of creating a sustainable cycle? But to your point, as I go off on a rant about list systems and get more women involved, I think opportunities like this, like tonight, where there's conversations happening, and to give a plug to the Conference on the Future of Europe, I think this is where the more and more voices, and unfortunately as women, we are the other voice, we're not the majority, we're a minority. Long before we talk about skin color, creed, orientation, mother tongue, as a gender, we are a minority, and the more voices of that we get into on the Conference on Europe, the more it begins to feed into the overall policy change. And I know that's long-winded, unfortunately. The political system moves like a slow motorboat up the river, whereas society is moving on a speedboat. But again, to the point, the more voices we get into the political arena, be it as a candidate or a support team, the more that begins to change. And we have even Stevens. I mean, if you look at the 2 referendums in this country, overwhelmingly passed by women using and actively participating in their voices. And to the point someone asked earlier about stalking and the world of online discrimination, hate speech, that is alive and well. Unfortunately, more for women. We see our journalists also participating. I think of our colleague, one might sit in a political different system, but the female politicians part of Fianna Fáil, who at their thinking were blatantly disregarded based off their attire. Like, that's disgusting in this modern age, and deters any women getting involved, because then you're wondering, I have enough stuff going at home in my community, why would I ever want to get involved? But if we don't get involved, then the voices around the table, that image of just suits and men making COVID plans never changes. And then we look at younger generations, and it greatly impacts for years to come.
So get involved. Listen, we just have a few minutes left. So before we wrap up, I'm going to give each of you an opportunity just to give a final comment. But before we do that, just picking up on what Maria was saying about the, I suppose, this Future of Europe conference that's going on at the moment, to remind people that tonight's event will have an activity report made from it by the 2 Europe Direct offices that are running it, Ballinasloe and Clonus. So the information and the comments and the feedback and the suggestions today are all going to be collated, and they will be uploaded onto the Future of Europe digital platform. And you've seen the web address there in the chat. And also the Clonus and Ballinasloe will be reporting their findings to the European Commission. And overall, that, I mean, the information is going to be collated, be looked at by the European citizens panels and the conference plenary. So there will be clear recommendations made on it. So I'd urge you to, as well as having attended this event, encourage people to watch the recording of it And also have a look at the website and see what else is going on. You know, see what other countries are saying. And it's not just about women's voice being heard. There's lots of other issues too. You know, women just don't have to deal with women's issues. You know, I mean, that this is all about women and democracy having their influence across a whole broad range of issues being heard and standing up and being counted. So that's my pitch for the evening. Before we finish up, I'm going to go around each of you and just ask, it could be, you know, one final comment that you can get a chance to make, or just some small piece you want to say to encourage people. So I'll start with you, Lorraine, if that's okay. Pick up the final words from you.
Yeah, sure, Maeve. I suppose, if I can say two final comments, if you don't mind. Yeah. Number one, I would like to say on behalf of the NCCWN, Blayney Blades and Docus, we would not be able to operate if it weren't for the volume of volunteers that come and support and help out with all our events. That's number one. And number two, I would really like to see in a progressive manner the parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the rest of the party, Sinn Féin, resourcing somebody to go into the transition year girls' schools, educate them in the line of politics going forward, or maybe just a multi-party thing, so that it's not kind of targeted at Sinn Féin, Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil or independents. I'd like to see the education starting there somewhere, and to enable the younger girls to see that there is somebody who will support them, and anybody who shows the interest then can be buddied up and mentored and give them the taster then going forward. And I think if we don't educate, we won't actually make any change going forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. I hear you there. I have a daughter in TY and would love to see that happening in TY. Maria, I'm going to go over to you next, please, for final comment.
Yeah, and I was just going to add in the chat there is a pilot project. It should have transitioned into a full-time, where there's in the senior cycle of secondary school, where politics and society is on the curriculum. They were testing it out in the last year or two. So if your school isn't involved and it is interested, just either ping me or to contact the Department of Education, contact your principal and see if they have to apply. I just have spoken at a couple of schools. That's how I know it is there. To the point on wrap up, listen, how we change society is how we engage with it. And I cannot stress enough how with 51% of the population, how we do not have equal representation. It's a big, bold, scary world, and I've kept my hair coloured, and it's been consistently grey since I entered. But I fundamentally believe you're not running for yourself, you're running for the generations that haven't even come. And to all the points today, if you do not see it, how the hell can we ever become it? So we need to champion each other. I think as women, we need to kick down the ladder and make sure a woman is getting on that ladder and you're pulling that up, because I think often we get competitive as we go up the ladder ourselves, and we forget the grassroots movements needs us more. And ultimately, Marion Harkin in particular was a huge mentor for me before I ran for election. And it's not about politics in conversations like this. It's about getting more and more representation and equal balance in our system. So any help I can give, please let me know.
Fantastic. Thanks, Maria. Uremeu, I'll ask you next for a final comment, please.
Thanks very much, Niamh. And just before I make the comment, you asked which EU countries are kind of raising the bar. This is not an EU country, but Iceland, I think that's an example. And in 2016, out of 63 seats, they elected 30 women, and that's 48% representation. And in that time, they have made, they've legislated for pay transparency. And what that has done, it has increased the number of women in management as well. So all these issues that we are reaming out, once we can have this gender balance, we're going to be tackling all of these issues, because it's not just in politics, there's inequality. It's in the private sector, it's in civil service, it is everywhere where you see management. How many photos have we seen of 12 faces and nearly all are male? That's where we need to be challenged. And again, it starts in government, starts in local authorities. Once we can get that balance, it'll filter down everywhere. So to my closing remarks, it has been articulated here. There is something for everyone to do. If you can't, if being a public rep is not for you, you can support somebody. You can be someone else's backbone. Look amongst your friends and your groups. Who's the most vocal? Who has something to say about everything? There's no breaking news that just lands and somebody has an opinion on it. That person can be a public rep, because we need champions. We need female champions to take our issues and run with them. And there is somebody like that in every group. And as Maria said, if I can be of assistance to anyone, I know I had a lot of support. It takes a village to get behind somebody's career. So if I can be of help to anyone, I'm more than happy to. And if I can just make a comment on a question that came in there, I think they say, in light of recent events in Afghanistan, can the panel see the life of women returning to what we in the Western world take for granted, i.e. full-time education, working freely? And there was a female parliamentarian that made a comment that with another government, which is predominantly male, they were trying to form parliamentary friendships, and they were inviting them over, and the direction of the conversation was, oh, some women should come along and meet the women in our country. And she said, I'm not having that. Anywhere everybody is, that's where I want to be. So straight away, they were nearly boxing the role of a female government rep. And that's how we can do it. When we engage with these with countries like Afghanistan, we have to be very vocal about the need for equality and fairness. And like Maria said, before we joined the EU, there were barriers we had to, there were, I suppose, milestones we had to reach before we were admitted, and we shouldn't be found wanting. We should challenge these companies when we do business, when we engage in whatever spaces, any opportunity we have to be the voice for the voiceless in every situation. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Uremeu. And finally, Michelle, a comment from you, please.
Yeah, trying to think what my parting shot would be. I think when we're talking about women's voices and the importance of having them heard, I don't want any woman listening here to jump straight to have to run for election, because we've talked about a couple of steps that are in between that. There's the public participation networks. I really would encourage people to look at those. But there's also the importance of that campaign team, the kitchen table team, the woman behind the woman. Lorraine talked there about the importance of getting young women involved in politics. I'm going to talk to the other end of the age spectrum and talk to the older woman who might be listening. You've survived teenagers, you've survived the menopause. Being part of a campaign team is absolutely a walk in the park for you. We welcome all women of all ages in to see her elected. If anything that was discussed here tonight sounds interesting to you, we'd love to have you along. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Michelle. And thank you everybody for your participation tonight. I'd like to thank the staff in Clonus and Ballinasloe Europe Direct offices for organising this event. And I'd also like to thank our tech support, iMedia. The women were absolutely fantastic there, so thank you. It all ran so smoothly, I think, certainly from our end anyway. And most of all, I would just like to thank you, the audience, and the 4 panellists for being part of this fantastic conversation tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to moderate it. I've just learned so much, and I have so much food for thought heading off now this evening. So from me, Maeve McCormack in Sligo, good night and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.